Hi there, Celia Gates here, and as the author of From Brainwave to Business, I thought it was important just to talk about this journey a little bit more in depth. The journey of inventor to entrepreneur, the journey of your idea and as it evolves and becomes ready for market, your personal journey and indeed the growth of your small business. Well, wherever it is that you're setting out, wherever you're at right now in terms of the stages of your journey, then I just thought it was important that I shared a little bit about how I felt when I perhaps started out. So right at the beginning I was possessed with this brilliant idea. The idea had occurred to me whilst watching my grandmother cooking. She was suffering from osteoarthritis at the time and actually was struggling to lift a hot and heavy saucepan off the stove. It seemed like quite a dangerous activity to me, and one in which she was perhaps in danger of losing her independence because of the fact that she was going to no longer be able to cook for herself. Now, in looking at this problem, it became very apparent that there was quite an easy solution. Rather than forcing my grandmother to bend her wrist awkwardly to clasp that straight-handled saucepan, it seemed to make sense to me to just curve the handle slightly, allowing you to grab it with a straight wrist. And so actually the idea part, the generating of the idea, that was born out of the noticing of a problem, but the generating of an idea was the relatively easy part. I was obsessed with the idea, and indeed I gave it the paramount importance in its position within the growth of my business. And this is what I've learnt in hindsight, if I'm honest with you. When we start off as ideas people, we're coming at it from that inventor's position. You know, that garden shed, that sort of bury myself in my ideas and my inventions and the science and the mind-boggling discoveries of developing these concepts, and forget about who I'm actually developing them for. So I was a designer, that was my background. I'd studied industrial design at Loughborough University. And actually as a designer, the design and the development part was what I knew how to do best. Somewhere in that short space of time that it took me to kind of conceive the idea, evolve it through various different stages of prototyping, and then present it as a marketable product, I started to lose a little bit of touch with the people who I was actually aiming this idea at, who was ultimately going to benefit. And this is what I wanted to share with you now. Because as inventors, we give so much importance to our ideas, whereas as in entrepreneurs, where the real importance comes from is from our target market, from the people we're selling our idea to, the wider world, the people around us, the people who are going to spot and benefit from that product or solution that you're offering. And so what I wanted to urge you to do at this stage in your journey was really to step back and understand what's the most valuable asset to you and your business. Now, it might be that you haven't actually got a product to sell yet. Well, that doesn't necessarily matter, because your most valuable asset is your customers, your customer base, and the relationships with the people that you've got who are buying from you. So may I suggest that irrelevant of where you're at in terms of your development, whether your idea is just a simple seed in your head at the moment, or whether it's out there and selling on the shop shelves already, that you actually take the time to stop and think about who is most affected by the problem that your idea seeks to solve. Who are those primary target customers that you're aiming your ideas at? Do you know them personally? In my instance, obviously my grandmother had I still do have a fantastic relationship with my grandmother. But my grandmother was my primary audience. She was suffering from osteoarthritis and she indeed enjoyed cooking. So that made her the perfect person to be investing in my pans. Now, as a designer, I got caught up in the ego of it all. You know, we want to be developing design-led products. We want to be making our mark in the design cutting-edge end of the spectrum, and not necessarily in the less sexy environment of supporting people whose physical needs need that extra special support. And actually, had I realised that, had I stuck to my guns instead of getting caught up with my ego, I'd have positioned my first product much more focused on meeting those needs. Now, obviously that came through with the evolution, and the product has gone on to be branded under the Dr. Cook brand and is primarily targeted at helping people who are struggling to lift a hot and heavy pan. But it did take me a little while to get there. I had to remind myself of that fact. So don't lose focus of that on your journey as you're evolving to becoming an extremely successful entrepreneur, to turning your idea into a successful startup business. Keep a clear eye on who it is that you're building relationships with, who your primary target customer is and how these people are actually the most valuable assets that exist in your business. So stop now and really think about that person. Can you describe them as an individual? Do you know how old they tend to be? Do you know where they hang out? Have you got existing contact with them? Now, it might be that you're telling me right now you haven't got an idea to sell, so what's the point in worrying about customers? Well, you'd be wrong. You see, it's important that you really start to consider your customers right from the word go, even before you've perceived your idea. Who is it that you've got those existing relationships with? Are you in groups with people on Facebook? Do you have connections via LinkedIn? Are you exploring the forums and blogs that are out there on the internet to find where these people actually hang out, to realise what they value as being important, how the problem that you're solving really affects them, and how this information can all be used to make a much more valuable presentation when you go forward to actually sell your idea in the end? So really think about this. Ask people those questions, start to build relationships with them. You don't necessarily have to disclose your ideas to them, and indeed that's one of the key messages, isn't it? Keep your idea confidential because there's a risk that somebody else might copy it. Well, apart from the fact that you're the person behind the idea, you're the one with the drive and the energy, you're the one that's really going to take that passion out into the market, and you're that fuel that's going to motivate the whole process. So even if there are other people out there that are going to copy it, statistics show time and time again that actually, whilst the idea person stays behind the idea is much more likely to be successful. So don't get too scared about what could happen if you were to tell somebody about it. Instead, try to be a little bit clever about how you do go out and tell them in the first place. You can ask them questions about the problems that they're suffering. You can ask them to expand on this. You can really get into understanding what those problems are and what other solutions they're using at the moment. Why are these not quite as satisfactory as the offering that you're putting together? Understanding all of that and asking people these questions, making them feel as if they're actually contributing to the wider development of your idea, well, that's going to certainly help you to build that relationship, but also to give your target market ownership over what it is that they're actually doing. So that in that sense, by the time you are actually ready to launch, you've effectively got a waiting audience wanting to buy into this idea because they've seen it develop in the first place. And that's the fantastic joy of the internet. You really can share your story with a wider world. You can start to embrace these relationships right from an early stage, to use them, if you will, to actually further your development. It might be that some of the ideas that are suggested to you really help you to compound your own decisions, to understand what's important, what you should be focusing and prioritising on as you develop your ideas. Now, if you're struggling to develop your ideas, well, of course, there's a number of different ways that you can do that. But I would strongly suggest to you that you're not necessarily always going to be your own judge in all of this. It's actually the people around you, your target market, who are your ultimate critiques. They're the ones who are going to vote with their feet, to be honest with you, by putting their hand deep into their wallet and actually drawing out that money and giving it forward to you. That's how they're going to explain to you, tell you that you've got a great idea. Until then, any lip service that they're paying or any compliments that you're taking on board, fine, they're fantastic. They boost your ego and they give you that sense of satisfaction that helps you to move forward. But listen carefully for the criticisms. Listen for the complaints. Listen for those objections, because they're what you're going to encounter more and more unless you address the problem and actually solve it. So by listening to what other people have to say around you, you don't necessarily have to disclose your ideas to them, but you can embrace that wealth of knowledge that comes in from all sorts of different directions to really make your idea one of the best, most sellable products out there. It's through innovation that you can really become a leader in your industry. Being an innovator sets you up as the person who's doing something first. You're the one really embracing this new idea and taking it forward, and as a result actually forcing the rest of the industry to look at the direction you're going in. Perhaps they'll copy you. If it's a great idea, I'm sure they will. But your aim is to stay ahead of that game, to really know your target market inside out, to understand the problems that they're facing on a day-to-day basis, so that actually generating those new ideas, making those greater offerings to them, well, that's the easy fun part. That comes as second nature to you as a creative individual. And if it doesn't, well, then there's some really easy ways to start learning how to embrace your creative brain too. We're all capable of generating these ingenious ideas. It's spotting the right problem and knowing how to solve it that's really at the heart of a successful entrepreneur. So if you're looking to acquire more knowledge, if you're realising that this perhaps is a gap that's not supporting your growth at the moment, something which you need to understand more about in order to know how to make those balanced decisions that are going to take you forward towards where you want to go, then I strongly urge that you read my book. Not only that, but it will give you that broad picture understanding. It'll give you that ability to understand what questions to start asking. And I'm here, having been through that journey, having turned my ingenious idea, and it was an idea that won the British Consumer Invention of the Year award, having turned that into a successful product that now sells in many of the large retail outlets, including Sainsbury's and Asda here in the UK, having gone through that process of developing the business too, of understanding what was important, of really realising how to build these better relationships with people so that I can understand their problems and then address their needs and then create something that's bespoke and of value to them. Well, that all leads me back to why I'm here in the first place. I'm here to support your greater growth by transferring the knowledge that I've perhaps acquired the hard way. I did say at the start that had I read this book first, I reckon I would have saved myself £94,000 in costly mistakes. That's a pretty expensive way to acquire an education, but it's been an incredibly valuable education, and I'm not denying that I haven't learned a huge amount from some of the mistakes I've made. But I'd like to make sure that you avoid making them in the first place. So if you've got a question to ask me about this video, by all means, ask the question and I'll seek to answer it for you. If, on the other hand, you'd like to start reading the book or indeed listening to it because I've recorded it as an audio version, then you know where to click straight through and on to the other side where you can start listening to the preview and preface straight away. In the meantime, do take care, absorb as much information as you like, do question people like me so that you can gain that knowledge quicker and by making less mistakes, because that's how you'll make sure-footed progress, turning your ingenious idea into a successful startup. Do take care, go out into the world and share your greater growth.